They pillaged the galaxy. A lone human warship emerged. Part 1: The Silent Stars. The Dominion had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. Their empire stretched across 1,000 systems, and their fleets darkened the skies of every world they touched. They were tall creatures, their skin like polished black stone, their eyes burning with cold yellow light. They did not negotiate. They did not show mercy. They simply took what they wanted and destroyed anything that stood in their way. Every species in the galaxy knew them. Some had tried to fight them. All had failed. They kept records of every civilization they had crushed, every world they had burned, every species they had enslaved. These records filled libraries the size of cities. They called themselves the Eternal Tide because, like the tide, they could not be stopped. High Admiral Iran stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Endless Night, and studied the star chart before him. A yellow star burned at the center of the display, small and unremarkable. Around it orbited 8 planets, and the third one from the star showed signs of life. The natives called their world Earth. Scouts had been watching this species for nearly a century. The humans were young, barely 1,000 years into their technological development. They had only recently learned to leave their own planet. They had no warships, no orbital defenses, no understanding of what waited for them in the darkness between stars. They were perfect targets. Oran pressed a button on his command throne, and his communication officer looked up. The admiral's voice was deep and cold, like stones grinding together. "Send the standard message," he said. "Inform them of their new status as subjects of the Dominion. They will surrender all resources. They will present their population for sorting. Those deemed useful will serve. Those deemed useless will be processed for organic materials." The officer bowed and transmitted the message. It went out in every language the had from intercepted human broadcasts. There could be no misunderstanding. The fleet waited. 300 warships hung in the void at the edge of the human system, their black hulls absorbing the distant starlight. Each ship carried enough firepower to burn a continent. Together, they could crack a planet in half. 17 hours passed, then a response came. The communication officer's face twisted with confusion. "Admiral," he said, "the humans have replied." "Read it." "It says, 'Come collect.'" Silence fell across the bridge. Oran stared at the officer for a long moment, certain he had misheard. No species had ever a Dominion demand, not once in 12,000 years. Then the admiral began to laugh. It was a harsh sound, like metal scraping against metal. The bridge crew joined in nervously, not understanding the joke but unwilling to question their commander. "They do not know what they face," Oran said. "They will learn. All ships advance. Standard subjugation formation. We will teach these humans what happens to those who defy the eternal tide." The fleet moved forward like a wall of darkness. 300 ships, carrying 1,000,000 warriors, enough force to conquer a dozen worlds. It was overkill for a species that had barely touched its own moon. But the Dominion believed in sending messages. When they were finished with Earth, no other species would dare to resist for 1,000 years. They crossed the outer reaches of the system, passing frozen worlds and fields of drifting rock. Their sensors swept ahead, searching for any sign of defense. They found nothing. No warships, no weapons platforms, no mines or traps or hidden bases. Just silence. Oran felt the first stirring of unease. He had conquered 47 worlds in his career, and he had never seen anything like this. Even the most primitive species tried to fight. Even the most hopeless cases attempted some kind of defense, but the humans offered nothing at all. Perhaps they truly did not understand. Perhaps they thought this was a bluff, or a mistake, or some kind of test. Perhaps they were so foolish that they believed the Dominion would simply go away if ignored. They would learn otherwise very soon. The fleet passed the massive gas giant the humans called Jupiter, and Earth came into view on long-range sensors. Blue and green and swirling with white clouds, it hung in the void like a jewel. Oran could already imagine it burning. Then something appeared on the sensors. "Contact," the detection officer reported, his voice suddenly sharp. "Single vessel emerging from behind the gas giant." Oran leaned forward. "One ship." "Yes, Admiral, it is. It is moving to intercept." The Admiral studied the sensor data, and his yellow eyes narrowed. The human ship was 3 kilometers long, far larger than he had expected. Its hull was covered in strange angles and hard edges, nothing like the smooth curves of design. It looked crude, almost primitive, like something hammered together in desperation. But it was moving fast, very fast. "Identify the vessel," Oran ordered. The officer worked his console. "They are broadcasting an identification signal. The ship is called Prometheus." Oran did not know what the word meant. He did not care. One ship against 300 was not a battle, it was a suicide. "Open a channel," he said. "Give them one chance to surrender. If they refuse, destroy them." The message went out. The human ship did not slow down. It did not change course. It did not respond at all. It simply kept coming. "Admiral," the detection officer said, his voice strange, "the vessel is accelerating. It is heading directly for the center of our formation. Then it will die in the center of our formation. All ships target that vessel, fire at will." Across the fleet, weapon systems powered up. Plasma lances glowed with terrible light. Graviton torpedoes loaded into their tubes. 1,000 gun crews took aim at the single human ship racing toward them. Oran watched the Prometheus grow larger on his. He felt nothing but contempt for these humans and their pathetic defiance. They had built one ship, one desperate hope, and they were throwing it away against an empire that had crushed 1,000 species. "Fire," he said. The void filled with light. Thousands of weapons spoke at once, their beams and missiles streaking toward the human vessel. It was enough firepower to crack a moon. The Prometheus flew straight into it. And kept coming. They pillaged the galaxy. A lone human warship emerged. Part 2: The Wrath of Prometheus. The first volley should have destroyed the Prometheus 10 times over. Plasma beams hot enough to melt steel. Graviton torpedoes that could tear apart molecular bonds. Thousands of weapons fired from hundreds of ships, all focused on a single target. The human ship's shields flared bright blue, then white, then colors that science said should not exist. The shields buckled and bent and screamed with energy, but they did not break. Admiral Oran stared at his, unable to believe what he was seeing. No species had shields this strong. The Dominion had spent thousands of years perfecting their weapons specifically to overcome defensive technology. Nothing could survive a concentrated fleet barrage. The Prometheus was not just surviving, it was still accelerating. "Impossible," Oran whispered. "This is impossible." The detection officer looked up from his console, his face pale with fear. "Admiral, the human vessel is returning fire." "One ship cannot." Then the Prometheus spoke. It was not like weapons. There were no glowing beams or streaking missiles. Instead, something simply left the front of the human ship at incredible speed, faster than the eye could follow, faster than sensors could track. The cruiser Unbreakable Will was the first to die. The tungsten slug hit it amidships, punched through the hull like paper, and came out the other side still moving. It struck the cruiser behind it, then the cruiser behind that, before finally losing speed and tumbling away into the void. 3 ships dead in less than a second. 3 ships killed by a single shot. "What was that?" Oran demanded. "What kind of weapon was that?" His weapons officer was shaking. "Kinetic projectile, Admiral. They fired a piece of metal at us, just metal, moving at 12% of light speed." The Admiral had heard of kinetic weapons. Primitive species sometimes used them before they developed proper technology, but no one used them in ship-to-ship combat. The velocities required were too extreme, the targeting too difficult, the power requirements too massive. The humans had made it work anyway. The Prometheus fired again, and again, and again. Each shot carved through the formation like a blade through flesh. Ships that had conquered worlds died in flames. Crews that had never known defeat screamed as their vessels broke apart around them. Oran ordered evasive maneuvers. His ships scattered, trying to spread out and make themselves harder to hit. It was the wrong choice. The human ship was not just firing its main weapon. Secondary guns opened up along its hull, smaller but still devastating. Point defense systems that should have been shooting down missiles were instead targeting fighters and destroying them by the dozen. And the Prometheus was moving in ways that should have been impossible. Ships turned slowly. They were massive vessels built for power rather than speed. Changing direction took time, and sharp maneuvers put terrible stress on crews and equipment. This was simply how space combat worked. Everyone knew this. The humans did not seem to care what everyone knew. The Prometheus spun on its axis without slowing down. It changed direction at angles that should have turned its crew into paste against the walls. It accelerated and decelerated so fast that the targeting systems could not keep up. One moment it was in front of a ship, the next it was behind, and the ship was already dying. Some of the crew began to panic. Whispers spread through the fleet. The humans had made a deal with dark forces. The humans had stolen forbidden technology. The humans were not natural creatures at all, but demons sent to punish the Dominion for its sins. Oran silenced the whispers with threats of execution, but he could not silence his own doubts. 4 hours into the battle, 97 ships had been destroyed. Nearly 100,000 warriors were dead, their bodies drifting through the void in the wreckage of their vessels. The greatest fleet the Dominion had sent to conquer a single world was being torn apart by one ship. But the Prometheus was not untouched. Its shields had finally failed under the constant bombardment. Its hull was blackened. Atmosphere vented from a dozen breaches and fires burned in its lower sections. It was dying, slowly but surely. Oran saw his chance. All remaining ships concentrate fire. Everything we have now. Kill that thing before it kills us all. 200 warships turned their weapons on the wounded human vessel. This time, there were no shields to stop them. Plasma beams scored across the Prometheus's hull. Torpedoes blasted craters in its armor. Piece by piece, the human ship was being torn apart. But still it kept fighting, still it kept killing. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Commander wiped blood from her eyes and gripped her command chair. Half her bridge crew was dead. The other half was wounded. Alarms screamed from every console, warning of damage that could not be repaired, systems that were failing, a ship that would not last much longer. "Weapons status," she said, her voice steady despite everything. "Main gun is still operational," her weapons officer reported. "But we are running low on slugs, maybe 20 shots left." "Then we make them count," studied her tactical display. They were clustering together again, concentrating their fire. It made them easier targets. "Helm, take us through their center. Weapons, fire at will." The Prometheus lurched forward one last time. Its engines burned with desperate power, pushing the broken ship toward the heart of the enemy fleet. Weapons hammered its hull, tearing away armor and equipment, but the ship refused to stop. Watch the enemy ships grow larger on her. She thought of Earth behind her, of the 7 billion people who were counting on her crew to buy them time. She thought of her daughter, still in school, who might never know what her mother had done. Then she thought of nothing at all except the battle. The Prometheus fired its last shots into the fleet at point-blank range. 12 more ships died in less than a minute. The human vessel passed through the formation like a bullet through a body, leaving destruction in its wake. When it emerged on the other side, The fleet was broken. Admiral Iran stared at the carnage around him. Over 100 ships destroyed, his flagship damaged, his crew demoralized, and still that human vessel hung in space, burning and broken but somehow still intact. He made a decision that no admiral had made in 8,000 years. "All ships," he said, his voice hollow with shame, "retreat, fall back to Dominion space." The remaining vessels turned and fled. They left behind the wreckage of their comrades, the bodies of their warriors, and something far more important: their legend of invincibility. Commander watched them go. Her ship could not pursue, could barely move at all. They had won the battle, but they had nearly died doing it. And she knew with cold certainty that they would return. They would bring more ships next time, 10 times as many, 100 times. They would keep coming until Earth was ash. Unless someone stopped them. Looked at the stars beyond her shattered, and she began to plan. They pillaged the galaxy. A lone human warship emerged. Part 3: The Admiral's Gambit. The Prometheus drifted in the darkness for 3 days, while its crew worked to keep it alive. Walked through the corridors of her wounded ship and saw the cost of victory. Bodies lay in the medical bay, covered with sheets, waiting to be given to the void. Injured crew members groaned on stretchers, their wounds too severe for the damaged medical systems to treat. Engineers crawled through broken sections, welding patches over holes, rerouting power through systems that were never meant to carry it. Of the 4,200 crew members who had started the battle, 3,100 remained, over 1,000 dead in a single day. It was the worst loss in human military history. And it was not enough, knew it was not enough. She gathered her senior officers in what remained of the conference room. Half the table had been destroyed by a weapon hit. The walls were scorched black, but the lights still worked, and that was all she needed. "Earth has maybe 6 months," she said, standing before the battered group. "They will regroup. They will send a larger fleet, 10 times as many ships, maybe 100 times. We cannot stop them." Her tactical officer, a young man named whose arm was wrapped in bandages, spoke up. "We could return to Earth, help them prepare defenses, train new crews." "With what ships?" asked. "The Prometheus is the only warship humanity has. Earth's government spent 40 years building her in secret, using technology from a crashed alien probe. We do not have 40 years to build another one. We do not have 40 months." Silence fell over the room. Everyone understood what she was saying. Earth was doomed. They had won a battle, but they could not win the war, not through strength. But was not finished. "They have ruled this part of the galaxy for 12,000 years, she continued. "They have never lost. They have never been challenged. Every species they encounter learns to fear them, and that fear keeps their empire together." She leaned forward, her dark eyes burning with intensity. "We are going to change that." Her executive officer, Commander Williams, frowned. "How?" "We are going to take this ship into the heart of Dominion space. We are going to attack their supply lines, their fuel depots, their communication stations. We are going to show every enslaved species in the galaxy that they can be hurt, that they can bleed, that they can be afraid." The officers stared at her, found his voice first. "Commander, that is suicide. We have one ship. They have hundreds of thousands. We cannot even repair the damage we have. Half our systems are held together with tape and prayers." "I know," said, "and I am not ordering anyone to come with me. This mission is volunteer only. Anyone who wants to return to Earth and spend their last months with their families will be transported home. I will not think less of them." She looked around the room, meeting each officer's eyes in turn. "But I am going, because the only way humanity survives is if we make this war too expensive for the Dominion to fight. Because if we die running, we die as cowards, and because someone has to show the galaxy that there is another way." The room was quiet for a long moment. Then William stood up. "I have no family on Earth," he said, And I did not join the Navy to run from a fight. I am with you, Commander. Stood next, then the chief engineer, then the weapons officer. One by one, every officer in the room rose to their feet. Felt something tighten in her chest. Pride, grief, love for these impossible, stubborn, beautiful human beings. Spread the word to the crew, she said. Anyone who wants to stay, I will respect their choice. We leave in 48 hours. When the votes were counted, not a single crew member had chosen to go home. The Prometheus limped toward the edge of human space. Its engines were working at half capacity. Its weapons systems were barely functional. Its hull was patched with materials that were never meant to see combat. It was a broken ship crewed by wounded people, heading into enemy territory with no hope of return. Before they crossed into Dominion space, recorded a message for Earth. She stood on her damaged bridge, surrounded by her battered crew, and spoke to the camera. This is Commander of the UES Prometheus. We are taking the war to the enemy. We will strike their worlds as they plan to strike ours. We will free their slaves as they plan to enslave our people. We will show them that humanity is not prey. She paused, thinking of her daughter, thinking of everyone she would never see again. Whatever happens to us, do not surrender. Fight them in the streets if they land. Fight them in the mountains. Fight them until the last human draws breath. Because the moment we stop fighting, we have already lost. She straightened her uniform, ignoring the pain from her wounds. We do not kneel, not now, not ever, Prometheus out. The message was transmitted to Earth on a tight beam that they could not intercept. Then the Prometheus engaged its faster-than-light drive and vanished into the darkness between stars. On Earth, the governments received the message. They broadcast it to every screen on the planet. 7 billion people watched a wounded woman on a dying ship tell them that hope was not lost. And they believed her. Factories that had been building consumer goods switched to military production. Scientists who had been working on entertainment technology began developing weapons. Millions of people volunteered for military service, ready to fight an enemy they had never seen. Humanity had 6 months to prepare for the end of the world. Thanks to and the crew of the Prometheus, they intended to use every single day. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, a lone human warship began its hunt. They pillaged the galaxy. A lone human warship emerged. Part 4: The Long Hunt. The first supply convoy never saw them coming. 40 transport ships were traveling from the core worlds to a mining colony on the edge of Dominion space. They carried food, equipment, and 10,000 fresh soldiers to replace the garrison. A single escort cruiser protected them, because no one had ever attacked a Dominion convoy in the heart of their own territory. The Prometheus emerged from behind a small moon, its weapons already firing. The escort cruiser died before it could raise its shields. The transport ships scattered in panic, but they were slow and unarmed. Did not destroy them. Instead, she had her crew board each ship, take what supplies they needed, and release the crews in escape pods. Then she broadcast a message on every frequency they used. This is Commander of the human warship Prometheus. We are in your space now. We will strike where you do not expect. We will take what we need and destroy what we cannot use. Tell your masters that the humans have come for them. The Dominion received the message with disbelief. One ship, in their territory, after fleeing from their subjugation fleet. It was impossible. It had to be a trick, a lie, some kind of deception. Then reports began to come in from across the empire. A fuel depot in the system destroyed. A communication relay in the sector silenced. A garrison on a border world attacked and scattered. Each time the same message was broadcast. Each time the same ship was reported. The Prometheus, the humans, everywhere at once, or so it seemed, had studied human history before she left Earth. She had read about guerrilla warfare, about how small forces could defeat larger enemies through speed and surprise and will. She had read about resistance fighters who held off empires, about insurgents who won through sheer refusal to give up. Now she was putting those lessons into practice. The Prometheus never stayed in one place for long. It would emerge from faster-than-light travel, strike hard and fast, then vanish before reinforcements could arrive. The hunting fleets were always one step behind, always arriving at empty space where the human ship had been hours or days before. But was not just fighting, she was also freeing. The Dominion ruled through fear, but beneath that fear was hatred. Every species they had conquered, every world they had enslaved, every population they had brutalized, all of them remembered what freedom felt like. All of them dreamed of revenge. Gave them a chance. The first world she liberated was called by its people. They had conquered it 2,000 years ago, worked its population nearly to death in their minds, and killed anyone who resisted. They had forgotten how to fight. The Prometheus arrived and destroyed the orbital garrison, landed with a team of her crew, and met with the local resistance leaders in a hidden cave beneath the planet's surface. "We cannot stay," she told them. "We cannot protect you. They will return and they will be angry. If you rise up, many of you will die." The resistance leader, an old female whose hands were from decades of mining, looked at her with eyes that had seen too much suffering. "We are already dying," she said. "At least this way we die with weapons in our hands." Gave them weapons. She gave them training. She gave them hope. When the Prometheus left, they rose up behind it. They captured the mines. They freed the prisoners. They killed every soldier they could find. The Dominion sent troops to crush the rebellion, but those troops were needed elsewhere now. The Empire was burning on too many fronts. Word spread. Other species heard what had happened on. They heard about the human ship that appeared from nowhere and gave slaves the chance to fight back. They heard the name Prometheus whispered in the dark, spoken with wonder and hope. Rebellions erupted on 12 worlds, then 20, then 50. The Dominion was bleeding. But so was the Prometheus. 3 years of constant combat had taken a terrible toll. The ship was held together by willpower and desperate repairs. Half its original crew was dead, killed in battle or lost to the slow grind of a campaign with no end. Had promoted teenagers to command positions because there was no one else left. She buried her friends in the void. She said words over their bodies and watched them drift away into the endless darkness. She did not cry because she could not afford to cry. Her crew needed her to be strong. But at night, alone in her quarters, she looked at pictures of her daughter and wondered if she would ever see her again. The Prometheus had made contact with resistance networks across Dominion space. Informants risked their lives to bring information about fleet movements. Mechanics from enslaved species helped repair the ship using stolen parts. A cook on an admiral's staff sent messages about high-value targets. The galaxy was helping, not because they believed humanity could win, but because the humans had shown them something they had not seen in 12,000 years. Courage. On the bridge of the Prometheus received a message from one of her informants. The Dominion was gathering every ship it had, 10,000 warships, the entire Eternal Fleet, assembling for one final attack. Their target was Earth. They had decided that the only way to end the human threat was to destroy humanity entirely. They would burn Earth to ash, broadcast the destruction across every frequency, and prove that resistance led only to extinction. Looked at the message for a long time. Then she called her crew to the bridge. "We are going home," she said. "One way or another, this ends at Earth." The Prometheus turned toward human space and engaged its faster-than-light drive. Behind it, a galaxy that had forgotten how to hope was learning to fight again. They pillaged the galaxy. A lone human warship emerged. Part 5: The Tide Turns. High Admiral Iran stood on the bridge of his new flagship and watched his fleet assemble. 10,000 warships hung in the void, their black hulls blocking out the stars. It was the largest fleet the Dominion had ever gathered, the combined military might of an empire that had ruled for 12,000 years. Today, they would end the human threat forever. The admiral had spent 3 years hunting the Prometheus. 3 years of failure, of watching one ship tear his empire apart. 3 years of receiving reports about destroyed convoys and liberated slaves and rebellions spreading like fire. 3 years of shame. Now it was over. The humans could not stop this fleet. No species could. When Earth was burning and humanity was extinct, the galaxy would remember what happened to those who the Eternal tied. "Begin the advance," Oran commanded. "We end this today." The fleet moved forward, crossing the boundary into human space. Their sensors swept ahead, searching for any sign of resistance. They found it. 300 human warships hung in formation around Earth. They were smaller than the Prometheus, but they were unmistakably warships, angular, brutal, covered in weapons. Where the Dominion had expected a defenseless world, they found an army. Oran stared at the sensor display in disbelief. Where did they get ships? They had nothing 3 years ago. His intelligence officer checked his console, his voice shaking. "They built them, Admiral. Our agents report that the humans converted their entire civilization to war production. Every factory, every resource, every person working toward one goal. In 3 years, that is impossible." "Apparently not, Admiral." The Admiral studied the human formation. 300 ships against 10,000. The odds were still overwhelmingly in Dominion favor, but something about the way those ships were positioned bothered him. They were not trying to form a defensive line. They were arranged in attack formation, as if they planned to charge. Then his sensors detected one more ship, emerging from behind Earth's moon. It was and battered, its hull patched with a dozen different materials. It looked like it should have been scrapped years ago. The Prometheus. Oran felt something cold crawl down his spine. That ship had destroyed 100 of his vessels. That ship had started a war that was tearing his empire apart. That ship had haunted his dreams for 3 years. And now it had come home to die. "All ships," the Admiral commanded, "focus fire on the Prometheus. Destroy it first. Then we deal with the rest." The fleet surged forward. 10,000 ships opened fire on one target, filling the void with enough energy to crack a planet. The Prometheus should have vanished in that storm of destruction. But the human fleet moved to protect it. Ships threw themselves between the Prometheus and the incoming fire. Their shields flared and died. Their hulls cracked and broke. But they kept coming, kept fighting, kept blocking shots meant for the ship that had given them hope. The Battle of Earth had begun. Commander stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, watching her people die to keep her ship alive. Her face was gaunt, her hair streaked with gray, her eyes haunted by 3 years of war. But her voice was steady as she gave orders. "All ships execute attack pattern Alpha. Take the fight to them." The human fleet charged. It was not the way wars were supposed to be fought. Ships did not charge into overwhelming forces. Commanders did not throw away tactical advantage for a head-on assault. But the humans were not fighting for territory or resources or even survival. They were fighting to prove a point. The two fleets met in a storm of fire and death. Human ships died by the dozen, then by the hundreds. But for every human ship destroyed, 3 vessels went with it. The humans had spent 3 years learning how the Dominion fought, studying their tactics, analyzing their weaknesses. Now they used every lesson. Weapons were powerful but slow to track. Human ships moved in patterns designed to exploit that weakness, dancing between shots, striking from angles the enemy could not cover. Shields were strong against energy weapons. Human ships carried kinetic projectiles that punched straight through. And the Prometheus led from the front. Had sworn she would never ask her crew to do anything she would not do herself. Now she kept that promise, driving her broken ship into the heart of the enemy fleet. The Prometheus killed everything that came within range, its weapons firing until they overheated, cooling and firing again. The battle lasted 9 days. 9 days of continuous combat, of ships destroying each other in the cold void around Earth. 9 days of human crews fighting without sleep, without rest, without hope of survival. 9 days of the throwing everything they had at an enemy that simply refused to die. On the 6th day, the Prometheus lost its port weapons array. On the 7th day, half its engines failed. On the 8th day, its life support began to fail, and the crew started breathing from emergency tanks. On the 9th day, Admiral Iran made his final move. The flagship was the largest ship in the fleet, a monster of black metal and terrible weapons. Iran had kept it back from the main battle, waiting for the right moment. Now, with the human fleet reduced to barely 50 ships, he saw his chance. The flagship accelerated toward Earth, its weapons charging for a planet-killing shot. Even if every remaining human ship threw itself in the way, they could not stop it. Earth would burn, and the war would be over. Saw the flagship coming. She saw what Iran intended. She looked at her bridge crew, her family, the people who had followed her across the galaxy and back. "It has been an honor," she said. Then she ordered the Prometheus to intercept. The broken ship threw itself into the path of the flagship. Its remaining weapons fired, scoring hits across the enemy's hull. The flagship fired back, its weapons tearing the Prometheus apart piece by piece. But had not come to fight, she had come to block. The Prometheus positioned itself directly in the flagship's path, directly in front of its main weapon. When the planet killer fired, it would hit the Prometheus first. Iran could have waited for the human ship to move. He could have maneuvered around it. But he was tired of these humans, tired of their stubbornness, tired of their refusal to accept defeat. "Fire," he commanded. The flagship's main weapon discharged. A beam of pure destruction lanced across the void, enough power to burn a continent. It hit the Prometheus head-on. Commander had 1 second to feel the impact, 1 second to know that she had saved her world, 1 second to think of her daughter, her crew, her species. Then the Prometheus was gone. But in that second, while the flagship's weapon was recharging, the remaining human ship struck. 50 vessels, all that remained of humanity's fleet, focused every weapon they had on the flagship. The ship that had never been defeated, the ship that had conquered 100 worlds, the ship that carried the admiral who had sworn to destroy humanity. It died in fire. When the flagship exploded, the fleet broke. Ships fled in every direction, their commanders desperate to escape the nightmare that Earth had become. The eternal tide, undefeated for 12,000 years, had been shattered. And standing in the wreckage, bloodied but alive, was humanity. 50 years later, the Galactic Accord welcomed its member species. Humans took their place among beings who had once been slaves, beings who had once trembled at the name. The old powers whispered about these humans. They were dangerous, unpredictable. They had challenged an empire with a single ship and won. They had built a fleet from nothing and defeated the largest armada in galactic history. On Luna, visible from Earth, a memorial stood. A statue of the Prometheus rising from stone, her name carved in every human language. Beneath it, a simple message: "We do not kneel." Humans brought their children to see the memorial. They told them about Commander and her crew. They told them about the 3 years of war, the rebellions, the impossible victory. They told them that the galaxy had learned to fear humanity, but also to respect it. Because humans did not fight for territory or power or wealth. They fought for each other. They fought for strangers. They fought for people they would never meet, on worlds they would never see. And that made them the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever known. In her office on Earth, an old woman watched the sunset through her window. Her name was Sophia, and she had been 17 when her mother left on the Prometheus. Now she was 70, her hair white, her face lined with years. She had never forgiven her mother for leaving. She had never stopped being proud. On her desk was a piece of metal, salvaged from the wreckage of the Prometheus. It was all that remained of the ship that had saved humanity. Sophia picked it up, felt its weight in her hand, and smiled. Her mother had been right, they did not kneel. Not now, not ever.